You ready, Pat? Okay. All right. Today we're going to talk about communication, which is something we all do all day, every day, whether we want to or not. But what we're specifically going to talk about today are how to communicate more effectively during those conversations that are so crucial for us as caregivers. Those are conversations where we might be conveying critical information, asking for assistance, or just trying to get someone else to understand what's going on right at this point in time. A conversation is a way of transferring information, thoughts, feelings, observations, and ideas from one person to another. And the goal is typically to arrive at some kind of mutual understanding of a situation or to agree upon a plan of action. We typically think about communication as either being written or verbal. In the course of a day, only about 25% of the information that's communicated is communicated via the written route. The other 75% of communication time is made up of either speaking or listening. Crucial conversations are those conversations that are really important for us for a number of reasons. And in the book, Crucial Conversation Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High, the authors say this about crucial conversations. They occur when opinions vary, when emotions run strong, and when the stakes are high. These conversations are not just challenging and frustrating and frightening, but they are more so that way because the results of the conversations can have a huge impact on the quality of life of yourself or of a loved one. And because these conversations mean so much to us, they cause an actual physical reaction. This is how that goes. Something you disagree with is said about a topic that you care a great deal about. The hairs on your neck stand up. Adrenaline pours into your bloodstream. That's that old primitive fight or flight reaction, you know, the one that was supposed to save you from bears and wild animals in the caveman day. Because you go into fight or flight mode, the brain diverts blood to those large muscles that would protect you when you needed to get away from a threat. So the blood flow actually increases in the large muscles of your arms and legs. Because the blood flow is going to those large muscles, it's diverted from the higher level reasoning areas of the brain. So that blood flow actually decreases. And the results of all of this are that you end up with your IQ being about that of the average turkey. And the turkey is considered one of the least intelligent animals alive. When we think about that, no wonder we try to avoid these conversations. In addition to not wanting to feel like a turkey, we often back away from these conversations because we're afraid that we will make things worse instead of better. So conversations that are crucial require even more care to make sure that the communication is clear and conveys what we intend to convey. Before we go any further, let's talk about obstacles to productive conversations. And this is a list of those. The first is being judgmental. Being judgmental means that you tell others how you think they are or they should be. And it implies that only your way of seeing the world is valid. Giving advice instead of listening. This usually sounds like, if I were you, I would, whatever. Moralizing. A good daughter would, or someone who really cares about us would never. Finishing sentences for others. We've all been in situations where that occurs and you don't feel like the other person's listening to you. They're just trying to get you finished with what you're saying so they can say the next thing. Talking too much. Responding in trite, comforting words, such things as keep your head up, or this really isn't as bad as you think it is. Being distracted by other things that are going on, or interrupting when the speaker's talking. I want to show you a picture next that kind of illustrates how we see the world. When you look at this picture, what's the first thing you see? I can't really see people raising their hands, so I will have to say that some people saw a rabbit first, and some people saw a duck, but we're all looking at the very same picture. This is a good illustration of how we view the world differently. We're going to talk now about the steps to prepare for crucial conversations that will help you communicate more effectively and hopefully achieve the goal you want to achieve without looking and sounding like a turkey. Let's talk first about how to prepare for a crucial conversation, whether that conversation will take place with a family member, a friend, or a medical care provider. There are 4 things we need to consider before we begin a crucial conversation. The first is to arrange to talk face-to-face, if at all possible. Text, emails, and phone calls are great for keeping in touch and for updates when both parties already have the same basic understanding of a situation, but can be easily misinterpreted without tone and body language. If you must use written communication, read over what you've written carefully and perhaps ask someone else to read it before you hit the send button. Find a quiet place for the conversation, one that is hopefully free of interruptions. It's hard enough to initiate and maintain a crucial conversation under the best circumstances. Interruptions, whether direct or indirect, increase stress and make it more difficult to maintain the flow of what is being said or listened to. If you're talking with a friend or family member, it might be helpful to schedule the time for this conversation when the person living with dementia can be entertained by someone else or has gone to bed for the night. Think carefully about what message you want to get across. Do you need to make sure someone understands what you're seeing happen with the person living with dementia? Do you need to ask for more help or support? Do you need more information on available options for treatment of behaviors? Identify the most important point you want to make or question you want to ask. If there's more than one really pressing issue, prioritize those issues so that you will be able to make sure to address them. The most important one are ones within the time and attention limitations of the conversation. Make notes to do this or a list and prioritize the topics on that list. One of the things we all tend to try to do is cover too much information in a conversation. That often leaves the person we are talking with overwhelmed with information or requests. Sometimes we really don't have a choice but to try to squeeze as much as possible into a conversation, but try to avoid that situation as much as possible. For some people, it's also helpful to play what I call the what if game. Think ahead to the responses that you might anticipate the other person would make to you and play, what if they said that? How would I respond? Just be careful that you're not so sure of what the other person is going to say that you fail to actually hear what they're saying during the conversation. Consider involving a neutral third party who can jot down some notes and perhaps play the role of mediator if that's needed. Sometimes it really helps for someone not directly involved in a conversation and not emotionally involved in the outcome to be able to say to each person, what I hear you saying is, and paraphrase what that person said. Sometimes, again, just this neutral, non-emotional repeating of what's being said in a conversation is enough to make the communication work much better. Okay, during a crucial conversation, start off by stating the purpose of the conversation. For example, I asked you to come today so that we could talk about the latest changes I see in your father. Be specific and don't use labels. We all use labels as a way to quickly convey what we are describing. However, labels mean different things to different people. Remember the picture of the duck and the rabbit. For example, when I say he's really becoming difficult to deal with, do I mean that he won't do what I ask when I'm trying to help him get dressed in the morning? That he tries to walk out the door every time I turn my back? Or that he tries to hit me when I ask him to take a shower? One of the most effective tools for clearly expressing oneself, exchanging opinions in a way that is respectful of the other person, and yet taking care of our own needs and goals during a conversation is using I statements. So what exactly are I statements? I statements describe your own viewpoint, not necessarily a fact about the situation. They avoid put downs, judgment, or assigning blame. An I statement sounds more like you're speaking from the heart because you're talking about what you think, believe, or want to say. It teaches the listener something about you. And I statements frequently open the door to resolve conflict. That is opposed to you statements, which tell someone else how they didn't meet your expectations, are accusatory and place blame on the other person. You statements often increase anger and frustration because the listener can only concentrate on defending himself, not on hearing you. And this makes resolving problems more unlikely. Think about the difference in how you feel if someone says, I need your help, or they say, you never help me. Here's some examples of I statements that you might use as a caregiver. I need some help with your father because I am feeling really tired and stressed. I feel really scared because I think her behavior is becoming dangerous. I want your help in coming up with possible ways to deal with this because I trust your input. It was my understanding that we all agreed to alternate weekends because that seemed fairest to everyone. Just be careful when you use I statements that you don't turn them into you statements by saying, I really wish you would do such and such. Pay attention to nonverbal messages when you're having this conversation. This includes your tone of voice, the volume of voice, eye contact or lack thereof, and your general posture. Words convey only about 7% of what we try to say. The other 93% of our message is communicated through facial expression, tone of voice and rate, and volume of speech. If what you say and how you look are at odds with each other, I will believe how you look. Try to really listen to what the other person is saying, not just to what you think they are saying. Many times we are so intent on figuring out what we want to say next that we miss what's being said to us. Have you ever asked someone to do something and then responded to what they said with, "I figured you were too busy to do this," only to realize that they just said yes to your request? Take some deep breaths and try to relax as much as possible during this conversation. Provide feedback to the other person by restating or paraphrasing what they said to you. For example, you've asked your son for help in getting your husband to his next doctor's appointment, which is on a Monday. He responds that he would like to help, but Mondays are his most demanding days at work. You can clarify that by saying, "I heard you say that Mondays were a really bad day for you because of work responsibilities. What day of the week would work for you?" At the end of the conversation, state what has been agreed upon. Using the previous example, you might say, "You said that Thursdays are the best day for you to take some time away from work, and you can go with us if I schedule future appointments on that day of the week. I will make sure that your father's appointments are scheduled on Thursdays whenever possible in the future." There are a few additional tips for talking with medical care providers. Conversations with medical care providers give you the opportunity to be a strong advocate for your loved one and an opportunity to proactively solve problems. Pat talked about the need to be proactive and pointers for preparing yourself for this kind of role in her last class. So after doing your homework and taking advantage of the skills possessed by others who might already be on your team, here are some additional specific actions to take to increase your chances of success. Take someone with you, a family member or a friend, if it's at all possible to do so. Many conversations with medical care providers are stressful and frequently spoken in a language that many of us don't understand. In addition, when conversations are so critical, we have more difficulty clearly conveying our concerns and hearing and remembering what's said to us in response. The person who accompanies you can take notes, remind you of important questions, and generally provide emotional support during a medical visit. If you're unable to physically take a person into the appointment with you, either because they're not in close enough proximity to be able to do that, they can't take adequate time away from work for the whole visit, or there's still some restriction in the doctor's office for how many people can be at a visit, try to connect with them during the conversation via a phone call, or perhaps even a computer with Zoom. Don't forget, in all circumstances, to bring pen and paper with you so you can make notes to yourself and perhaps jot down information that will make you ask additional questions. Be even more prepared for conversations with medical care providers than for other critical conversations. Make a list of your concerns and prioritize them. If there's information you want to convey, write down what you want to say, or at least make notes about the topic or topics and the key points. Not only will this ensure that you address important concerns and questions, it will also go far in ensuring that you have time to address everything you want to within the time limits of the appointment. One way to prepare for communication with a medical care provider is to begin that communication before the visit. Use the patient portal for this, if at all possible. Using the patient portal avoids talking to someone in the office and them writing down what they think you said and then passing it on, where things can end up being like a game of gossip that you played with a child. And using the patient portal is preferred by many medical providers these days. If you're unsure about the mechanics of using this electronic form of communication, ask for help. Family members or friends who've asked you what they can do to help you might be astute in using this technology. And if all else fails, ask your grandchildren. If written information is going to a medical provider's office, be sure to include the date of your loved one's last appointment or the date of the upcoming one, and a statement that you do not want to discuss these details in front of the person living with dementia, if that is the case. Ask questions to clarify what you're being told. Don't hesitate to ask for clarification if you don't understand what's being said. Don't be intimidated by medical jargon. Ask the medical provider to write down what changes he wants to make and what he wants you to do before your next visit. Many providers now give you a summary of a visit that has been typed up and is printed for you to take with you when you leave the office. Take a minute to look at that summary and make sure that it's clear and that it contains all the information that you remember from the visit itself. If not, stop at the front desk on the way out and say, Dr. So-and-so told me I needed to do this every day, but it's not clear on here the frequency. What am I really supposed to do? And get a clarification before you get out the door. In addition, this is where the person who's gone with you and taken notes can be particularly helpful, because some of these summaries say very little and aren't helpful at all in knowing how to proceed. Many individuals who are living with dementia are also living with other chronic diseases and may be seeing multiple specialists. As much as it's helpful to have one primary physician, whether that's a primary physician, an internist, a family medicine person, or a neurologist who's in charge of care, sometimes we can't avoid seeing other specialists. This was true for my husband, Roy, who also had rheumatoid arthritis. And we found out fairly early in his disease process that Medicare would only pay for the medication he was on if the prescription were written by a rheumatologist and not by anyone who was considered a generalist in medicine. I found that keeping a list of Roy's diagnoses and when these were made, and a list of medications, including when the medications were started, when the dosage changed, or when the medication was discontinued, was one of my best tools. I put this list on the computer and printed it so the medication information was on one side and the diagnoses were on the opposite side. This information is especially helpful if your loved ones, if there's been a significant change in any of your loved ones' diagnoses or treatment. With caregiver brain, it's really easy to forget the order that something happened in or to leave out details without having notes. It's also helpful to keep notes about the visit in a notebook. This may be the actual notes taken by the person who goes with you, or notes you make during and after the visit. You may want to keep the original notes or to write a summary of the important points from the visit, depending on which is easier and clearer for you to do for quick reference. My father is 95 and has Alzheimer's that is progressing very slowly, and my mother is 90 and still very active. Mother has kept a calendar, one of the large calendars, book calendars, where she records information in different colors for when he has a doctor's appointment, when she has an appointment, what was done at that visit. I know that information's there, and I know where to find it if there's ever a situation that I need to access that information quickly and she's not available for whatever reason to provide it for me. Before we leave this topic, I need to say a few words about crucial conversations that fail in spite of all the time and energy you put into preparing for them. Sometimes we have to know when we've put enough effort into trying to build the kind of relationship we need with someone else. There may be a friend or family member that we need to put on the back burner for a while. That doesn't mean forever, but don't waste precious energy essentially beating your head against the wall when there's so much demand in your day-to-day life as a caregiver. Pat has a YouTube video called Handling Family Problems that says a little more about this topic. This is a quote I found, though, from Julia Roberts. When people walk away from you, let them go. Your destiny is never tied to anyone who leaves you, and it doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that their part in your story is over, whether that's permanently or temporarily. You also need to trust your instincts and judgment. This goes back to one of the 5 P's that Pat talked about last month, that of being perceptive. Although this applies to family and friends, it carries even more weight when working with medical providers. You know your loved one better than anyone else does, especially since you're in the role of caregiver. Your insights and observations are frequently more important than those of the medical care provider. He knows the general course of dementia. You know the specifics of daily life for the person living with dementia. If the provider you're seeing doesn't listen and ignores your questions, observations, and input, and perhaps is backing out the door slowly as you're trying to ask questions, it might be time to move on. Firing a medical provider is easy. Simply don't go back. Talk with others you trust to find the kind of provider that will listen and support you in whatever you need to do. In summary, let's review some key points for crucial conversations. Plan ahead. Set the stage, making sure it's comfortable, quiet, and as undisturbed as possible. Use I statements. Think about starting the conversation with, I need your help. Listen carefully and actively. Be aware of nonverbal messages, that body language that conveys even more than words do. Summarize any decisions and make sure both people heard and agreed to the same thing. Identify any needed next steps. Then breathe and pat yourself on the back. Know that you've done the best you can do and gained valuable information, whether the outcome was what you had hoped for or not. And doing the best one can is all we can ever ask of any caregiver. This last slide is some additional resources that you might want to look at that provide some more in-depth information about the topic today. Thank you.